Okay, Rabbosai, we have the distinct privilege for a return visit of Dr. Josh Penn, who was a dear alumnus of ours from way, way back. The story of how he got to the yeshiva is on a rainy night back in 1980. It was 80, right?
Yeah, December 80.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So the rainy night, there's a knock on the door late at night. And again, something that could never happen today, but then it was a different kind of an environment, is he's knocking on the door, I'm here because I want to learn in yeshiva, and the guys let him in. And the next morning, today I hope you guys would not do that. You're not supposed to let strangers in. But Baruch Hashem, in those days we let him in, and he had one thing going for him and one thing going against him. He was 19 years old, and in those days we really did not take 19-year-olds. But he had graduated Brown University, and we really wanted Ivy League students. Anyway, Baruch Hashem, the rest is history. One of our closest alumni, he came back after he got married. He came back with his wife to do a married couple's year with her. I've been chavrusas with Dr. Penn. He actually became a chavrusa of mine on telephone. We used to do a telephone chavrusa in the old days, and then it transitioned to Skype. I don't think these guys know what Skype is either. But then it transitioned to Zoom, and then go to meeting. And we were learning for many hours a week, long distance. He's in Los Angeles, 10-hour time difference. Anyway, so Dr. Penn is a big Talmud Chacham. He's Kovei Itim. I have to confess, and I embarrassingly say, he probably learns more hours a day than I do. Because he's very serious, but he was also a big, he was one of the Gedolim in cardiology. And if you want, I'll explain to you later what it means to be a Gadol in cardiology, because there is such a concept. But again, the important thing is that he's Kovei Itim LaTorah, serious Torah learning, serious professionalism, and he's here to share the secret with you, so you guys can replicate that.
Thank you, Rashaya. I'm only sorry that my wife isn't here, so she would have a chance at rebuttal. But otherwise, we're okay. So, we just got finished with Sukkot. There's something a little bit funny about Sukkot, because if we ask you, what are we commemorating with Sukkot? There's two funny things about it. There's no really one event. Yetzias Mitzrayim, an event. Shavuos, an event. Matan Torah. Yetzias Mitzrayim. Chanukah, Purim. It's all an event. Sukkot, it's not really an event. It's sort of a state of being over 40 years. We had a Nani HaKavod, and then the second thing that's a little bit funny is the machlokes. Do we have machlokes about what Pesach is about? Do we have machlokes about what Chanukah is about? Not really. We know what it's about again. And Sukkot is like, well, we have this famous machlokes. I'm going to quote from Sukkah Yud Aleph Amud Beis. Anani HaKavod Hayu Divrei Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Akiva Omer Sukkos Mamish Asu Lahem. Now it's important to understand that Asu Lahem is in the plural. Yeah. So there's a machlokes between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Akiva, two Tanaim in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, and they say, Rabbi Akiva says it was about the Anani HaKavod. The Anani HaKavod were these miraculous clouds that covered Bnei Israel during their 40 years in the desert, and the Midrash talks about it, and the Gemara talks about it. These Anani HaKavod prevented it from getting too hot or too cold. It prevented their shoes from wearing out. It kept their clothes from getting dirty, or washed their clothes, however that would work. And so this protective, miraculous Anani HaKavod lasted for 40 years in the desert. And Rabbi says, no, it's because they built sukkahs. Okay, they built the same like we do. They built huts because it was an unpleasant environment. But that's not an event; it's a state of being. And why is there machlokes? So I want to give you an idea about what the event itself might have been, and I want to try to explain a little bit why I think there's no machlokes. Well, machlokes is, as Aaron Lichtenstein was used to famously say, it's two sides of the same coin. We'll explore that for about a minute. I know my time is limited. I'm not going to. It's only an hour and a half to talk. Is that good with everybody? So, in the first pasuk we talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim, when Bnei Israel actually left, okay? There's lots of stuff about Pesach Mitzrayim and what's going on and Makas Bechoros and all the different kind of things. When they actually say they leave, the pasuk says like this: Vayisu Bnei Israel mi Ramses. Now Ramses, as you know, is an Egyptian city. They were working there. So they left Ramses. Where did they go? Sukkota. They went to a place called Sukkot. Now, I guarantee you that on Google Maps, there wasn't just a town outside the Egyptian border called Sukkot, and they happened to stop in there. No. It's called Sukkot in the Torah for a reason. So what's that reason? Well, we have the word Sukkot in one place before, and that's with Yaakov Avinu on his way back from Lavan. He stops at a place called Sukkot. And why does he call it Sukkot? Because there he built Sukkot. So we understand that Sukkot isn't the name of a town. It's the moniker for the activity that was occurring there. They built Sukkot. Okay, the first night. Don't forget this. And then that first night, where were they? They stayed in Sukkot. So now imagine the scene. I'll paint this picture just very, very briefly. They didn't have any food, right? All they had was some batzek, right? They had some dough, and they didn't have a chance to rise. They're going to bake their matzahs. They had as much stuff as they could carry. They had no infrastructure. No water, no electricity, no heat, no air conditioning, no structures, no roadways, nothing. And they march out into the desert. Why? Because God told them to, basically. And Moshe led them out there. They end up in Sukkot. It's dark. It's probably cold. There's nothing around. They're huddled together with their animals together. And what do? Do they complain? Do they say, you know what, this whole idea was a bad idea? They're only one day's journey back to Ramses. They could have all turned up and gone back. In fact, I think a lot of us would have done that. I said, look, I was all in favor of Makas Bachoros, and that was all good. But I'm not going to just sit on the ground and in some dirty, dusty place in the dark in the middle of the night with no food and no water and no shelter, no nothing. But what they did is they built Sukkot, which means, here I stand. Here I stand. You, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, took me out. You brought me to the wilderness, right? The nothing. This is where I got to be, and because you said so, I'm in. And that's what they did. The sukkah means they told the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they showed by their actions, I'm in. What's the significance of that? Many, many hundreds of years later, the Navi tells us that God has a tremendous love for Bnei Yisrael. And why? Ki yeled sha'ashuim, leichtech acharai, bamidbar be'eretz lo zarua. Why? Why did I love them so much, even hundreds of years later, and they're guilty of avodah zarah, and all kinds of things are going wrong, and they're not behaving the way they're supposed to be? God said, but I have such a great love for Ephraim yeled sha'ashuim, because they followed me out into the desert where there was nothing, and they just showed up with no preparation, no resources, nothing. And they were somech on HaKadosh Baruch Hu for whatever might happen, we're in. And they know what's going to happen. The guy didn't promise them any specific thing. Oh, get to this next place, there'll be a nice hotel. There's no promise about the future at all. It just says, go to the desert. And that's it. So they don't even have any information from God himself about what's going to be. They have the slightest satisfaction. They have to rely entirely on their own emunah and their own personal strength, and they have to tough out that first night. What happened after that? Okay, it's, Visipur, as they say. Okay? So what's the significance of that? Because they built those sukkot, that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them a nani hakavod. You understand? It was that night in those sukkot, God says, you know what? Because of the way you behaved, you're now zocheh to the nani hakavod. And that's why it's not really a kasher of Eliezer or a Akiva. Because it's two sides of the same coin. What are we celebrating? We celebrate the Bnei Yisrael, and I'm going to flesh this out now for the next 3 minutes. They created the kli that was necessary to receive the shefa of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is a very, very important Kabbalistic concept, and I think it's the big message of Sukkot, and I think this is exactly what Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer are mechavi to, and more importantly, I think this is the fundamental key to all of our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's especially appropriate for right now, right after Sukkot, because we're going to Cheshvan. Cheshvan is my favorite month of the year. There's not one single holiday. There's not one single distraction. You've got nothing to do for 30 days, but do what you're supposed to do. That's it. That's all there is. You don't have to hustle invitations for Yantif. You don't have to buy gifts. You don't have to go get your clothes washed. You don't have to go to the shop. You don't have to do anything. The only thing you have to do is what you have to do. And what you have to do is you have to mimic those Jews huddled in a dirty vadi somewhere outside of Egypt, and you have to create, and now I'm going to give you a little bit of a Kabbalistic concept, but it's well established in mainstream Judaism. God has everything. God is everything. Whatever you need, God has the ability to provide it completely. Right? Does that make sense? Do we have any limitations on God's power? No. But, this is an important but, in order for any individual Jew, and certainly for a Klal Yisrael, to receive those brachas, and that bracha could be in any form. What do you guys most want? Is it parnasa? Probably not. Hopefully not. Right? You want to make money? No. You want to get a shidduch? Maybe, but not right now. What you mostly are here to do is to become fully B'nai Torah, and become Talmidei Chachamim. And by the way, none of that happens ever for anybody completely without a lot of direct spiritual energy from God himself into you and your neshama. So how do you make but your neshama has to be ready to receive. That bracha is out there. There's no limitation on God's bracha. But what you have to do as an individual, we all have to do, is we have to make ourselves ready to receive. Because if I have, a big, jug of magic water that solves all your problems, and you go like this, you're going to get an ounce. If you build a big kli, you're going to get all 5 gallons. You understand? And what's unique about this thing is that everybody's kli is different. Your kli isn't like your kli. Everybody's kli has to be different because you're individuals. And what you have to do is take your own personality and your own strength and your own netiyas and build that into a kli that is capable of receiving the bracha and the shefa of God himself. Okay? And, I have to say, it only comes with hard work. That's easy, right? Nothing of that's really worth something comes easy. So you have to really apply yourself. You have to trust your own individuality. And one of the very, very big advantages of being here in this yeshiva specifically is this yeshiva acknowledges your individuality and works with every bacher the way they are. Nobody's trying to reform your personality and, turn you into some kind of clone and do that. No. The yeshiva appreciates your individuality, but it respects that every individual Jew has to find his path to a Kodesh Baruch Hu, to create a kli in and of himself that is roi, that is appropriate to receive the bracha of Hashem. But I also will tell you, this yeshiva has a track record that you can't believe of that actually working. I don't mean in some theoretical way, in some poetic, kind of allegory. I'm talking about it simple and concrete. I myself had a chavrusa here, not so many years ago. Well, everything is so many years ago with me now, but what can I tell you? Who came to the yeshiva, he didn't come from zero. He knew how to read Hebrew, he had a tiny bit of an almost background. He really had never learned seriously before. He spent 2 years in this yeshiva. Now again, he worked hard, he applied himself, and 2 years later, he went to the Mir, and he was learning in Shir with guys who had spent their entire lives in yeshiva. He had 2 years of learning experience, and they had 15 years of learning experience in the same Shir, and then just a year and a half later, he was already in the Varadeli Shir. It's not normal. It's l'mayla min hateva. It's not normal that a guy can start from near zero, and in 2 years, he's already able to sit with elite learners and function. But it's happened here not once, not twice, right? Am I right? In countless times.
It's still happening.
And it's still happening. And here's the kicker, and I'm going to stop with this. It can happen to each and every one of you. Whatever your goals are in Limud Torah, whatever your goals are in Adinas HaNefesh, developing yourself and in your learning, you can actually achieve it because you don't need Teva. According to the normal rules of Teva, you should really have to bake here about 15 years before you become a decent Ben Torah. According to the normal laws of physics. But Kodesh Baruch Hu will actually give you b'choshi chinam, as a gift, the ability and the progress and the I don't want to say magic because it's almost like but the shefa of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself can infuse yourself, and you can achieve what you want to achieve here. And I say this not out of some kind of poetic promise, but out of hard reality, because I've seen it, and the Rosh Yeshiva and the Rosh Yeshivas have seen this many, many times. And there's not one person in this room that it couldn't happen to, as long as you have the will. And as long as you have the stamina, and as long as you have the genuine desire to make yourself a kli for that bracha.
Get some questions. No questions. Anybody have any questions for the doctor?
No? You want to know how to treat heart failure? No, I'm just kidding.
Kinda.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Sukkah is any place where the Sukkah is going on. He says
the place was called Sukkot because that's where Bnei Yisrael built their Sukkot. The same way Yaakov came to a place and built Sukkot, so they called that place Sukkot.
I see. There's a placeholder name for it.
Yeah, I mean, right. Like he didn't go to Hebron. He went to Sukkot. But Sukkot isn't a real place. It wasn't a real city. It was just where they came and where they set up their Sukkot. That's right.
What tips would you have for people going into the working world to maintain their strong connection to their life?
Okay, so that's a very, very classic question, a very worthwhile one. Interestingly, everybody has a different kind of job, and people's jobs are different levels of demanding, both of time, energy, attention. I will tell you with modesty, and not for fear of too much contradiction, that being a cardiology fellow and then being a cardiologist in a busy practice, is pretty demanding. It's 10, 12-hour days, and you're on call, and, all that other stuff. So, there's 2 stages. Okay? the first stage when you're starting work is you have to carve, again, there's no magic here. You have to carve out kovei itim. Okay? You have to have a set schedule. You can't learn when you get a chance. That's a recipe for failure. What you have to do is you have to pick a block of time, hopefully several blocks of time a week, whatever you can. When I was like in the ICU at Uncle 3rd, I had one block a week for 2 hours where I learned ksubis with a chavrusa. Okay? But that sustained me all throughout that period of time until I could get to the next level. So it is necessary to start that way, but it is insufficient to continue that way indefinitely. Okay? Because what happens is you build your career, you become more autonomous, you rise up in your chosen path, whatever that is. In almost always you get more control over your time. Okay? When you're an intern, you have 0 control over time. By the time you're a fellow, you have 10% control over time. And when you're the lowest guy in the practice, you're almost back to 0. But by the time you're a managing partner, then you have control over your time. And then it's incumbent on you to use your job and use your career advancement in the service of your own Torah, in the service of Klal Yisrael's Torah. So you say, well, you know what? 2 hours a week learning ksubis was all I could do. And I'm good with it. And I don't regret about it. It was like the maximum I could do at that time. But I'm not still in that same situation. You have to be very honest with yourself. Say, okay, now, you know what? I need to schedule, I don't work nights anymore. So I need to schedule every night at, after the kids are going to bed, 9 o'clock, whatever that is. From 9 to 10, I'm going to learn an hour every day. And I'm going to find a chavrusa to do it. A few people, a guy like Mitch Ader can learn on his own for 25 years and accomplish a lot. It's not normal, okay? Almost everybody in need a chavrusa. He's higher you than learning, he's lower in you than learning, he's the same, he's convenient, he's on the phone, he's in person. Those are all secondary. The primary thing is you have to be accountable to another person who's also reliable, so that even when you're tired, and even though, the kid is up, you have to say, look, Ron, I can't, you tell your wife, look, I can't help it. The guy's waiting for me, I can't just no-show. So you have to have that discipline, and that discipline requires a chavrusa. And then, on my own story, again, I'll tell you I don't want to bore you with the whole life story, but there came a point after I had been in practice for 7 years, and I was at a certain position in the cardiology group, that I left the group, and I went out on my own. And the primary motivator for that, I was just not willing to be on call on Shabbos and Yom Tov anymore. Despite all the, you jump through all these hoops and everything, but you're in the hospital, I had a person who wrote my notes for me, all that stuff, it just wasn't enough. I wasn't going to spend Shabbos and Yom Tov outside my house anymore. And so I went, and I had my own practice. And everybody told me I was crazy, because I was in the dominant group at Cedar Sinai, and they said, you're going to starve to death. There's 150 cardiologists at Cedar Sinai. What are you going to, hang a shingle? What are you going to do? Who's going to send anybody to you? So I will tell you, and the very first thing I did, the day I started, is I hired another cardiologist, who I knew, to take care of all of my inpatients, and do every single one of my weekends and chagim. And, I was paying them. And I said, okay, am I going to break even this first year or not? Let's see, I don't know. But I'll tell you honestly, from that very first year, I already did better than my best year in the group. And then it went from there. Why? Because I'm such a great guy? No, probably not. Well, honestly, probably not. Because I was lucky? Nah, we're Jews. We don't believe in lucky. Because I really built the kli. And I said, look, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm really doing it. I'm putting my whole life where my intellectual theory is. And I'm leaving the practice, I'm taking a big risk, I'm jumping off the cliff. Look, I'm not being foolhardy, I'm not walking in front of a train, but it could easily be that I could have gone that whole year and maybe break even. Right? Which is hard when you got a wife and 4 kids, and everything else, and a mortgage and all that other stuff. But I will tell you, I honestly believe, there's no way to prove this or disprove it in the physical world, I honestly believe that the reason that I suffered, not at all, but in fact benefited financially from what was by most accounts a crazy leap, was because HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw I was genuine, understood why I was doing it, and decided, you're not going to, you're going to pay other prices, but you're not going to have to pay that price. And the Kachave, and that's how it was for the remainder of my clinical career.
How do you become such a cleave where you can have these outsized gains? A lot of us know that it's important to learn, it's big mitzvah to learn, we want to connect with God. Mm-hmm. And we know that we need to, that's why we all came here, but how do we actually have outsized returns, so to speak?
Okay, because you have to be for real 24 hours a day. When you're in the base medrash, you have to be for real. You have to be learning, you have to be asking. When you're in shir, you got to be paying attention, you got to be asking questions, you got to be for real. When you're on the phone with your mother, you got to be a ben Torah. Right? When you're walking out to the shuk to buy nuts for Shabbos, you got to be a Ben Torah. And if somebody steps on your toe, or bumps into you on the bus, or asks you for money, you have to be a Ben Torah 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you're in the dorm with the other guys, when you're at some lunch, and you're meeting all kinds of people you don't know, wherever you are, that's what you have. So you can't. It's not that you have to do learning; you have to be learning. It has to be a state of being and not just an activity. That's the fundamental core thing, I think. And I'll just tell you one. You won't know it's happening until after it happens. You won't know it's happening until much later. That's been my experience most of the time. You'll turn around and say, "Hey, wow, I just went through a whole process by myself." The first time you do that, I'll be like, "I can't believe it! I did that whole place." I mean, it was 4 lines, okay. But then it'll build from there. It'll build from there, and you'll be amazed. But it won't happen right away. Say, I'm learning. There'll be a lot of frustration. There'll be setbacks. The nature of life is that there's hardship and there's setbacks. It's not a bug, it's a feature. This is the way life is supposed to be. Because working through those challenges, and again, same thing, everyone's going to be different. Your challenge isn't going to be the same as his challenge. Working through those challenges is in many ways what Dafka creates the growth. That doesn't mean you say, yippee-ki-yay, I'm having a bad day. That's not how it works. But working through the challenges and saying, I'm a Ben Torah all the time, even when it's raining. Even when it's raining, and I didn't bring my umbrella. And then it happens.
Okay, I think that's Shapell.
Just one more thing, Doctor. Could you, in the past you spoke about the difference of having a rooster going to shear when you're out there. Could you comment on that?
Okay, so again, this is my own personal idea. Other Rabbeim may say differently. I'm not being colleague with anybody. For me personally, Chavrusa beats shear by like 10-1, because anything passive is much less than anything active. Now, if you're in a shear and you're the top guy in the shear, and you're asking questions, and you're up there, you're going to the Magi chair afterwards, and you're teaching up how did he learn over here, then you can make the shear be pretty valuable. But in general, the learning has to be as active as possible, and to be passive as little as possible.